Hey, Kim, I'm so happy to have you on the show.
Arin, I am so excited to be here with you having this conversation.
I feel like you are about to drop some major wisdom bombs for all of us that are either parents thinking of becoming parents of adult children. I have a feeling like I'm about to get schooled in the best possible way. So just know I'm so open to it.
Okay, good. Well, I hope I say something really full of wisdom then for you.
Before we get started, we're going to do our icebreaker questions so we can get to know you a little bit. And the first one, of course, we love music here on the podcast. What are you listening to right now?
My favorite band is AJR.
Oh, I don't even know about them. I'm going to go look it up.
Okay. Well, they're three brothers, and I went to their concert last spring with my then 19-year-old son, who's since turned 20, and he's the one that turned me on to their music, and I just absolutely love AJR.
Okay, I'm going to check it out. We'll put it in the show notes. Everybody can go listen. Now, you have a night off. You're sitting on the couch watching Netflix. What is your snack of choice?
Chardonnay and healthy popcorn.
Ooh, nice. That sounds great.
That happens every night. That happens every night.
That's what my husband, when he met me, he's like, oh, you're on the wine and popcorn diet. I see how it is.
Yeah, that's me for the last 30 some years. And it's part of my mental health self-care. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it's your thing. Okay. So you get the chance to have tea or coffee with anyone alive or dead. Who would you choose?
I would have chai tea with Oprah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that'd be so good.
Under the trees. Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter. Just a conversation with her would be amazing. And that's my long distance dream goal would be to have that conversation with her.
I see it. We're putting it out there for you.
Yes.
So I was on your website. I found you on TikTok. I've been cruising your stuff, and I was on your website, and something that you said there really hit me. And it's that mothers, if we could tap into, I think you said our innate wisdom or own our wisdom, that we would be able to parent our daughters and our sons better. And there was something about that statement where I was like, I know I have wisdom, but as a mother, I have wisdom because, I mean, if I'm being honest, I feel like I'm flying by the seat of my pants most of the time. And I am often asking, where is the adult? Like, when is the adult going to show up here? So talk to us a little bit about this mission you have.
Well, I think that one of the other things I say is also on the website is moms are the emotional barometer in their family. So when moms are working on themselves, are taking care of their emotional and physical and spiritual well-being, it ripples out to everybody else in the family. I do believe that we have become very outside looking for the answer in terms of parenting, and there's a million great books on the market. And it's not to say that we shouldn't sometimes look outside of ourselves to get affirmation or to get direction if our kids are going through something that we don't understand. Certainly, I've done that over the years. But we forget that we do come, when these kids come into our lives, whether it's through us or to us, and when we have a connection with them. So if we can get quiet and tap into that, and our intuition and our divine wisdom comes from here, not here. Like, here is the anxiety, the chatter, the worry, the what if, the fears. And there's absolutely things that can be feared in parenting for sure. But when we channel our parenting from here, nobody knows us nobody knows our kids like we do. And so to always be looking outside for the answer sometimes really confuses, and there's too much messaging coming in. So part of what I do when I coach moms is to help them reconnect with themselves and start trusting their own gut instinct about their unique kids.
This really just lights up a few centers for me. So my listeners know that I'm a mom of two. I've got a 5.5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. And the day my 5.5-year-old was born, I was completely in love. I was holding this beautiful baby. And my first thought was, she's amazing. She's beautiful. Oh my gosh. I've never been this in love before. And my second thought was, what the fuck were my parents doing? Right? Like, do you hear that often? Like, it was this moment of reckoning, like, oh my God, my parents were like out to lunch. They had this precious, beautiful soul and they totally fucked it up. By the way, we swear in the podcast, so sorry if that offends, but we're going to keep
That's
it
fine.
real.
That works for me. Obviously, if you've seen my TikToks, you know that sometimes comes out of my mouth as well.
Sometimes comes out. So that was the beginning of me realizing that I had to do a better job than they did. And that's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure. And I don't know that I actually have that innate wisdom because I wasn't raised that way.
I can see that. I had my first son at 18, and I can tell you that wasn't my second thought. I don't know what my thought was, but it wasn't that. It wasn't until my son, that same son at 20, walked through an addiction to alcohol that I really made the connection to wanting to parent him differently and the 4 kids behind him differently by looking at what had, and I think I was somewhat conscious of what my parents had done and what, but not, I didn't really connect the dots. I didn't really think, okay, I think it was because I was 18 and had walked through teen pregnancy and the way they handled it. And then here I was with my son about the same age, walking through his addiction and thinking to myself, how did my parents handle this when I really needed them, when I was going through something really difficult, and how do I want to handle that? And that's what really created me really looking at parenting in general. And then, you know, a whole world opened up when I found Dr. Shefali Sabari and the Conscious Parent. And then it just kind of exploded from there.
So what is your advice? I guess there's maybe 2 pathways that I could see a parent being on. One would be mine, which is I'm at the beginning of the parenting journey. And yes, if I'm being honest, one of my biggest fears is that one of my children will fall into addiction. There's a long history of it in my family. So what's your advice for that parent? And then what's your advice for the parent who is currently parenting a child through addiction?
Okay. So for a parent who is concerned about this because they have a family history, I would say having open dialogue and conversation, not coming from a place of fear, but rather education and helping your kids understand the adolescent brain. You learning about, because we've learned so much about the adolescent brain in the last, since I was growing up, we've learned a lot. So educating yourself on the adolescent brain and how addiction can affect that, and having conversations with your kids, not coming from a place of fear. That's about your work. That's about the parent work. And instead coming from a place of wanting to educate. And I think the best thing that we can do to create good relationships with our kids as they go through their teen and young adult years is to be able to cultivate a relationship that isn't, I'm the parent, you're the child, but is this. And it's not friendship. It's not friendship. It's mutual respect. And if your kids don't feel that and it starts young, like if they don't feel that they can come and talk to you, they say, I've heard this about the little things, they won't come to you about the big things. And I think that's really true. Is if I'm looking back, you know, at my own parenting journey, I certainly am not here to say that I have been the perfect parent and don't still have challenges, but I'm very aware of what my triggers are and I work on those. So that would be my suggestion as well. But definitely for the parent who's concerned about, you know, potentially addiction with their son or daughter, I think there is an age appropriate way to be honest with your kids about your own experience. I think that's important. I know parents get worried about that. They're like, I don't want to tell my kids because then they'll use that against me. I think you use it more as a lesson of teaching rather than, using it as a lesson of teaching, I think for sure. So educating yourself on the adolescent brain, sharing that with your kids in an age-appropriate way, using your experience at times in a way that's palatable to share with them as well as helpful. For the parent who is in the midst of a child who's a son or daughter that's going through addiction, one of the things that I didn't do that I think a lot of parents get stuck in is the whole blaming, why me, not our family, that kind of talk. And while I definitely took the time to look at how I had contributed to the situation with my son, because I didn't get stuck there because it wasn't productive for him or for me. So what I will say is, if you're a parent in the midst of this, look at where you contributed, because that's important, but don't sit there. Don't get stuck there. Move forward, because it doesn't serve the situation that you're in, and it certainly doesn't serve your son or daughter.
Yeah, what it makes me think of is, so my dad was in NA for almost my whole life. And my mom was an alcoholic, but never sought treatment. And I feel like I learned the concept pretty early on that it was a family disease. And it's not like the person showing the symptoms of addiction is really just the identified patient, but it's the whole family, and it goes back generations. So what I'm hearing you say is there's this moment where you just have to go, it is what it is. And it may not be my fault. It might not even be my parents' fault. It could go way, way, way back. I mean, if we're being honest, addiction has been around for generations upon generations, and there's many socio and economic reasons that we fall into that. So I love that advice of not getting stuck in that blame, because who does that help? It really doesn't help your child at all.
And I think a lot of parents do get stuck there. And I don't know, I can't tell you why that didn't happen to me, but I really look at that, the call that I got from my son on that day in May of 2008, as not only a parenting wake-up call, but a personal awakening and a shift in, again, looking at how I was raised and the parent I wanted to be for not only my oldest son, who was 20 at the time, but all four behind him.
So I want to go back to your advice about younger children and sharing your experience with addiction with them. So I'm had a bout of drug addiction and alcohol abuse. And I often think, how am I going to talk to them about this? Like, what am I going to say? When am I going to say it? Because I definitely don't want them to think less of me. I also don't want to romanticize it. My mom romanticized it. And as I look back on that and I go, oh, she never really told me, don't do drugs. Drugs are bad. She told me the stories. She was very open about her experience, but I didn't hear that message. I also didn't hear that message from my dad. He would take me to NA meetings. And obviously, the stories are bad there. But it was more romanticized for me. And so I'm not sure how to tell my children what the age appropriate time is and how to tell my children the stories of what I went through and what I learned. So I'd love to hear some.
I think that it's earlier than you think you need. I mean, my thought is, 11, 12, but we keep hearing over and over, like, you need to do this earlier rather than later. That being said, I would ask yourself to put yourself in an 8 or 9 year old's position. And this is more than one talk, right? This is not like we're going to have the talk once and here's what it's going to be. This is going to be an ongoing conversation. So I think that you might revisit what your experience was when tell them maybe what you think is appropriate and could be handled at 8 or 9. And then as a preteen would be a little bit different. As a high school kid would be a little bit different. So it's going to be an ongoing conversation. And then I would ask you to ask yourself, when you think back to your own young self, what So you know what your experience was, what would have been helpful to you to hear from your parents. And that's where I would base my conversation is in your parent. You had the experience with parents who, in retrospect, romanticized it or didn't give you the information. So think about what would have been helpful to your 8, 9, 10, 12, 15-year-old self.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's a journaling exercise.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to sit down with that. I like to do the inner child dominant hand journaling. So I might need to go back and ask 8-year-old me.
Yeah.
What would have been helpful? Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. It's so good. So what young kids, I feel like they do deal with really early on, and I'm curious about your thoughts here, is they deal with sugar addiction and screen addiction. Like it's starting pretty early. I mean, my 2-year-old is pretty crazy about cookies. It's like, whoa, sometimes. So do you see any correlation there? Is that what you mean about talking to them about the adolescent brain and helping them understand?
Well, okay. So in terms of screens and first, and listen, I am a mom of 5 who has, I've watched sugar. I've watched kind of my kids progress through all the stages, right? My oldest is 36 or going to be 36. My youngest is going to be 18. So I've kind of watched how social media screen time, I've watched the progression of that, the earlier the use and my younger kids got phones and things way earlier than the older ones, just simply because iPhones weren't out. But what I'd say is obviously when our kids are really little, we're responsible for what comes in the house and how we moderate food wise, right? So that's one thing. Second thing is in terms of screens, if I look back, man, there is no shortage of research done now on how affected even young adults' brains are we knew for years, we were told like, don't let them have too much screen time, be careful what they see. And I think there's always been kind of a fear factor. Now we know, and I really am hopeful. I don't think my generation of parents did a very good job. I think in part it was ignorance, in part it was not wanting to believe that there was really going to be a problem, but I think we're seeing it now in high schoolers, in college students. And I hope that parents your age and younger parents in general will take heed and do a better job, because we definitely were the generation of, trying to digital pioneers, daily use, not having grown up in it. Now, I hope that you will do a much better job than we did and wait longer and really moderate. And I hope parents will band together, because I think that's one of the things that was hard too, was parents not agreeing together. And then some parents doing things they didn't want to early because they just didn't know how to, they wanted to be part of the group. So, because sometimes parents do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we could have you on for a second episode
about that.
All about this, because I think there's also a root in the parents' central nervous system being deregulated, and the screen and sugar. The screen, the lollipop, is an instant way to get a relief as a parent. And so that's a whole nother can of worms that I know as a parent, I wasn't prepared for the nervous system dysregulation that I was going to experience and how to take care of that for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, let's have you back. That would be great.
Okay.
I want to just go back to the adult child a little bit, because I would love to hear a bit of your story if you're open to sharing it.
Sure. Yeah. So I mentioned that I had my oldest son at the age of 18. I finished my freshman year in college, 6 months pregnant, and came home for the summer. I wanted to keep my baby. My dad was very clear and adamant that he did not want that. So he gave me the ultimatum shortly before my son was born, was leave the house or give the baby up for adoption. So I grew up very middle class, upper middle class. And so I didn't even know what welfare was, but someone told me about it and I went and applied for benefits and I moved out of the house the day that he was born. And it, after a very traditional upbringing, like it definitely was a wake-up call and a growing journey for me to become a single mother at 18. I ended up being in an abusive relationship with my son's father. So by the time he was 3, I managed to extricate myself from that relationship with him, but I still had to co-parent with him. And that made for a lot of struggles back and forth. So shortly thereafter, I got married to my husband, who we've been married almost 31 years at this point. And over the course of several years, we had 4 kids together. So I have a total of 5 kids. And when my oldest son was 20, so he went back and forth between 2 very different households for 15 years. And on his 18th birthday, my husband and my son got into an altercation because, once again, alcohol was missing from the cabinet, which is something that had happened several times during his high school years. And my son just said, I'm going to move in with my dad. So he did that. And we shortly thereafter left our home state of Wisconsin to move to Texas for my husband's job. And about a year after we were in Texas, my son, who was 19 at the time, called me from Wisconsin to say, I don't remember the last 3 days of my life. This isn't the first time, and I need help. So that ensued. And he had struggled with some anxiety and depression during high school, and we got him into counseling, and I did some counseling with him. Didn't really ever seem to go anyplace. And of course, hindsight's 2020. I learned a lot later. But what happened was, after a course of probably 6 or 7 or 8 months of really major ups and downs with him, he had gotten a DUI. Things progressively got worse fairly quickly. I ended up flying to Wisconsin without telling him, and then ended up taking him into treatment in the southern part of Texas. That was 2008. It took him until May 20th of 2010, after his dad's death due to alcoholism, to make a decision in a second stint in jail, which I didn't bail him out either time, to decide that wasn't the way he wanted to live his life. And so he has continued to struggle with anxiety, depression, and OCD, but has worked very hard to create a life for himself. He's married at this point and will be 13 years sober in May.
Yeah, well, I understand that anxiety part and how tempting it is to medicate it. And it's not just alcohol. I really like to normalize that we can self-medicate with work. Mm-hmm. We can self-medicate with relationships. And it is hard when you have that anxiety, that constant anxiety that you can't turn off. And then you find something that seems to turn it off. That's tempting.
And that's why I think, especially if I were to, not that I want to veer too far off course, but I work with a lot of parents who have young adults that are struggling with mental health and they're using marijuana. And I'm not here to judge that one way or the other, except to say that the earlier marijuana use starts, the quicker it can become addictive. I mean, what marijuana does to a 12-year-old brain versus even an 18 or 19-year-old brain is completely different. So I am of the parent where I'm like, the longer you wait, the better. It's the one non-negotiable, one of 2 non-negotiables I've had with my kids over the years.
Yeah. Well, as someone who, I like to say I work with my anxiety because it ebbs and flows. It's here sometimes. It's postpartum triggered it so bad. I thought I had a handle on my anxiety, and then I gave birth and I was like, whoa, this is the stuff that's going on up here is not cool with it. So personally, I do a lot of things for managing anxiety, and none of them revolve around a substance. The closest thing to it is I teach people about essential oils. So I do a lot of aromatherapy and meditation. That's the closest thing to a substance. But recently, what I have found that is so helpful with anxiety is this really simple meditation I do morning and night that I learned from a woman who was on the podcast. And it's kind of this meditation where you just go, whatever you believe, your higher power, God, angels, aliens, whatever it is, and you like clear off your energy body.
Mm-hmm.
Her concept was like a lot of anxiety is actually you're a sensitive, empathic person, and you're picking up all these thoughts and feelings, like your radar is too turned on.
Mm-hmm.
That has been extremely helpful. It's been really surprising, but there's no magic bullet.
No. And everyone has to find their particular way of dealing with it. And you got to try a lot of things, I think. I think it's a trial and error type of situation. And in terms of energy, I do a grounding exercise. I call it a grounding exercise where I release because I see parents might do 4 to 6 individual sessions a day. And the parents that I work with are parents of 18 to 25-year-olds who have mental health issues, they're failing to launch, they're smoking a lot of pot, do they need treatment? They're high. There's just a lot of emotion involved. And so it's very important every evening I go through this meditation where I release all energy that is not a part of me, that is not to my highest calling, and then call in energy from the divine to, kind of recalibrate myself. And I feel it. So I get, you know what I mean? Like I know, people might think that's silly or whatever, but I feel it. When I feel it leaving me, I feel it coming into me. It helps me a great deal. I don't think I could continue to do the work that I do with parents if I didn't take that time, which it doesn't take that much time, but if I didn't do that, I think I'd be even physically heavier.
Yes. And it's just intentional. Like a lot of people who listen to my podcast are what I call woo curious. So they're not quite sure, maybe some crystals, maybe some oils, but don't get crazy. So if it feels weird to you to clear your energy, it's just intention. Like we give ourselves a shower. I mean, I don't shower every day, but pretty much every day, but we don't bathe our energy, or we don't like let go of things we picked up. So if anyone's listening, like give it a try, especially if you're a coach or a healer, or you work with people one-on-one. If I was a school teacher or a nurse.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think the medical, like if you look at nurses these are people who go into fields because they deeply care about people and they're helpers. They want to help. But I do think there's a physical component to holding other people's energy that isn't yours and it turning into actual physical matter.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. And, I'm in a recovery program with adult children of dysfunctional families, and the idea of a higher power has been difficult for me. Mm-hmm. And that daily grounding meditation where I just kind of call on all these different elements. Sometimes I say my higher power, sometimes I say guardian angels or spirit guides. It's helping me connect to a higher power. It's helping me heal that connection, because now I'm actually starting to feel something there. I still don't know what it is, but I'm starting to feel like supported by the universe, which is really one of the most profound ways to heal addiction and dysfunction. If you can believe that there's something out there that cares for you, you suddenly have the strength to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's beautiful.
Oh, I love it. I'm so glad that we got this chat. It's been great. I want to know what you're up to. How do people work with you? Give us some of those goods.
Okay. So the easiest way to connect with me is through my website, which is reallifeparentguide.com. And I am on TikTok and Instagram. I spend more time and energy in TikTok, and that's Kim Muench Parent Coach. Also the same on Instagram. I went into the studio this week and recorded a 2-video session that's going to be professionally edited and music added to it and whatnot. It'll eventually be on the website, but the title is Creating Independence, Setting Boundaries with Teens and Young Adults. That's one of the things that is really, I work with parents a lot on. And it's not about boundaries around our kids' behavior. It's about personal boundaries for parents and deciding how they will interact and how the relationship that they're creating with their son or daughter. So I'm excited about that. That should be on the website shortly. And I do have a moms group that I do twice a week. It's on Zoom, and I have moms from all over the country coming together to work through their parenting challenges. They all have older kids and older, and it's just amazing. They get so much from the camaraderie in that group. So those are things too. I also have a book. And the book is called Becoming Me While Raising You, A Mother's Journey to Herself. It's the story of the 6 limiting beliefs I took on during my childhood that were playing out over and over in my marriage and in my parenting for many years, until the walk I took with my son through his addiction that prompted my personal awakening and how I've shifted those beliefs into something that has not only better served me, but better served the people that I love most.
Well, it's been such a pleasure to connect with you. And there's a few videos I'm going to go watch on your website. And of course, continue to follow you on TikTok.
Good. Oh, great. I love that. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, Kim. I really appreciate your time and your wisdom today, and keep doing the good work out there, because I know you're helping a lot of people.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Loved having this conversation with you, Arin.